Yes, thanks everyone for joining. For those who don't know, my name is Jose. I do a little bit of everything in Metis, but I'm mainly on the marketing and biz dev side. I'm gonna be hosting from the Metis account today. And yes, our guest for today is Natalia Ameline. So, Natalia, would you mind giving us a brief intro about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Natalia. I am also at Metis, and I'm the lead of the Genesi Investment Fund.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thanks for that. So, Natalia, today you're gonna have to treat me pretty much like if I don't know anything about the topic that I'm gonna be answered, like asking you about. So, nothing about the Genesi DAC. So, you're gonna be teaching me like from pretty much from the bottom. So, would you mind giving me a brief introduction to what's the Genesi DAC?
Yes, absolutely. So Genesee is the Metis Ecosystem Fund. So what is the Ecosystem Fund? Ecosystem Fund funds are normally created to support the ecosystem. So what we do is we invest in the projects that are building on Metis. The way it's structured, it's in the future it will be structured as a DAO and will operate online. Right now, it's working, let's call it offline, but we're trying to mimic the DAO structure as much as possible. It is, I guess, the best way I would describe it. It's a conglomerate of the independent VC funds who got together and they created this investment DAO, and with the goal of supporting the Metis ecosystem.
Okay, okay, awesome, awesome. That's an amazing explanation. Yeah, like what would you say are like the main sectors that the Genesi DAC is currently looking at or looking for whenever they kind of like think about investing or or kind of like helping contributing to projects that are coming to Metis.
Um, we are really looking at everything. Our target audience, as I mentioned, is the projects building on Metis. But outside of that, we pretty much open to projects from all sectors in the blockchain. It could be DeFi, Metaverse, GameFi, whatever you name it, as long as the projects meets our selection criteria.
Okay, okay, so it could be either GameFi, NFTs, like you said, DeFi. It could be like any innovative project that meets like your criteria, independently of the sector in which it is.
Yes, absolutely. We are welcoming the projects from all sectors.
Okay, okay. And by the way, that's awesome that like the Genesis Act is making the transition to be like fully on chain, like in a future, kind of like to be like on the blockchain. I wasn't fully aware of that, and I think that's awesome. So I was wondering, like, since you're saying that there's no kind of like not a single sector that the Genesis Act pretty much like is not looking for, just kind of like any project that meets their requirements. So would you mind kind of like elaborating a little bit more on that? Maybe what are the requirements or what is the Genesis that kind of like selection process for whenever they're
Yeah,
looking into possible
absolutely.
investments?
Yeah, I would love to. So, in terms of requirements, first and foremost, again, as I mentioned, the project got to build on Metis, right? It doesn't mean that it cannot exist on other chains. I just want to be clear about that. You can be already, maybe you already built and deployed on Ethereum or other layer 2 projects, or layer 2 blockchains. I mean, or even outside of Ethereum ecosystem. But you should be willing to also deploy on Metis and create your ecosystem on Metis. So that's one of the kind of things that we're looking a priori before even we start, the conversations, right? So in terms of this, so how the overall process works is the project typically connects with our business development team first, and the business development team will discuss with the project, all the details and understand how your project fits into Metis ecosystem, and how and the relation got to be mutually beneficial, right? So we are looking at it from selfishly from our standpoint, making sure that the project is a good fit for us. right?
By the way, just to clarify, in case it wasn't like super clear, whenever Natalia means the business development team, she means Metis, not Genesi DAC, Metis Foundation.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for this clarification. So once the business development team clears the project, I will be in touch with you guys, and I would request the several pieces of information from you. It could be, your first of all, your investment pitch deck, your white paper, your tokenomics, if it's applicable, your social media accounts, information about your team, etc. The key, of course, is have a very good, well-structured investment pitch deck that would be very easy to follow for investors to understand what your project is all about and what the key, uh, highlights of the projects are and what are the key selling points. Once I review the information that you submitted, typically I will set up a call with the project team. And the reason for that is really for me to kind of get a better feel about the team, get us introduced. My role is to make sure that I am helping you guys to improve on your pitch and provide you feedback on your project. So once we have a call and assuming it all went well, the project may have a chance to actually pitch to Genesi Investment Committee. You know how I talked about that Genesi is basically several VC funds that join together. So out of this number of these VC funds, we have three that act on the Genesi Investment Committee as the it's rotational positions, but their goal and role is really to screen the project. It's the next step in the screening. So your project will be pitching to the investment committee, and the pitch will be recorded. And once the pitch is done, investors will ask you for questions, and we'll have a Q&A session. And then after that, investors typically will deliberate for several days, couple of days, to decide if your project is a yes or no in terms of its investment status. And again, there are many factors that play into it. But if the investment committee votes as yes, what happens next is the information about your project will be released to all VC members of the Genesi Investment Fund. And all the members will have access to your recorded pitch, to all the information that you shared, and they will be individually looking at your projects. And if they are interested, I will be putting you in touch with those VC funds that are interested in your project and talking further. I would like to emphasize that the by the Genesi Investment Committee as yes doesn't necessarily mean that the funds will be granted. It just means that this additional step in the process have been passed, and the investment committee deemed your project as of good investment grade. But after that, of course, each individual VC funds decides for themselves if they would like to invest in a project. It could be that the project is great, but investors just currently looking at a different space, or they are looking for maybe project in a different stage. So it's really all depends. It could be many things, but normally there will be one to several VCs that are interested in talking further with the project. And once this conversation starts happening, then it's really already up to you to negotiate all the terms and conditions. And the VC funds will conduct their own due diligence, and they will be, signing the documents and the appropriate agreements directly with the team. So you can have one investor out of it, or you can have several investors out of it. So that's high level how the project works and the
Oh,
process works.
okay. So just to do a little recap, and you can confirm at the end of the recap. First, teams or projects must go to a business development team of Metis Foundation. After they go through that filter, they then must send you a deck of information, like about the project, or you are gonna get in touch with them for them to send you a deck of information about the project, everything that you may need, and after that, you're gonna contact them back in case they are indeed meeting all the requirements, all the criterias. After approved, then these teams may go to a Genesi DAC and actually pitch to them individually, while also the information about the team is sent to the different investors. Is that it, or can you correct me?
A little correction there, right? So after the business development team, typically, as you mentioned, the I will request from the projects the information, including pitch deck, etc. I will schedule a call to talk with the team. And if I pass the project, then they will pitch to Genesi Investment Committee, which is the three VC members of Genesi Fund. If those guys approve the project, then the information about the team and about the project itself will be released to the general Genesi Investment Fund membership, to a greater number of investors. And following that, they will be, directly in touch with the project if they are interested in further conversations.
Okay, okay, awesome, awesome. Thanks for that. That was a great breakdown of the whole process. For all those builders wondering what are the requirements, etc. So I was wondering, you said after some time, after they review and everything, they might get in touch like individual investors. Will you remind us how more or less what's the time lapse, kind of like how long these teams would have to wait usually to get a response, kind of like to get a word from these investment funds?
Yeah, that may depend, because usually what happens is that, we are pretty good in terms of, getting through the threshold, and then Genesee Investment Committee votes, and the interested VCs are getting in touch with the projects. That itself may take, a couple of days or a week. But, after that happens, the duration of time between that and when the project actually gets funded could vary, and it will depend on length of back and forth between the project and investors, how long the due diligence will take, from the investor standpoint, the how long the contract will be negotiated for. So it's hard to say, how long it may take. It may happen quickly, very quickly, or it may take, a couple of weeks to do it, or even more. It will be subject to, as I mentioned, those things that need to happen before the documents are signed.
Okay, okay, perfect. So it's pretty much like up to the funds, kind of like after it's finished, kind of like on our side, it's up to the funds, kind of like to get in touch with them, and that's pretty much on their hands, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because as I mentioned, while the Genesee is sort of an umbrella under which there are a number of different VC funds, the negotiations are happening directly with these funds, right? So you
Okay,
can be negotiating with one, or you can be talking with several, right? And ultimately, you could be funded by one, or you can be funded by several. So you need to go through this process and come to the terms and agreements with each of these funds.
okay, okay, perfect, perfect. Would you say there's any kind of like red flags, or kind of like anything that teams or you, whenever you check out decks, are definitely kind of like not looking for something that alarms you, or raise a red flag whenever you're looking at a deck or a team, or I don't know, like tokenomics, social media, like
Mm-hmm.
anything that rings a bell?
Yeah, it could be a lot of things, but like the first one that jumps to my mind is, I'm always looking at the team first. And if any team member previously have been linked to the projects that behaved in any shape or form unethically, that would be a no-go. So in other words, if you've been part of a rug pull before, don't anticipate any further cash. I think it's pretty straightforward and visible. But then, outside of those things, as I mentioned, first and foremost, I'm looking at the team and how experienced they are. I'm looking at the information available about them, where, which projects they worked before, what their background is, how it fits with what they're doing for the project. Basically, looking at I'm looking for the team to have a strong track record, right, and also right skill set to develop a good strong project. Sometimes you have a team which is comprised of just developers, and it's not to say that the developer cannot wear many hats and be good in many things, but sometimes it's just the folks that are really focusing on product development, but they're not really thinking beyond that in terms of how I'm going to go acquire the clients, how I'm going to market my product, does my product going to make is my product going to make any money in the future. So it's just really good developers who want to create a great product, but great product is not just the code, right? It's all other things that go with it. So
Okay.
team first, right? So then, of course, I'm looking at you mentioned it, Jose, the followerships, right? So marketing and what the project has been able to amass in terms of the followership already on the social media or any other channels that they are using. Because why is it important? It's important to know for us investors that if the project is going to receive the funds, we need to be sure that the project has tools and has a good strategy, thought out strategy to build it out in terms of users, right? So it's not 3 users, it's not 200 users. We want to see how you are able to get it to hundreds of thousand users, right? So that's what we need to see. And what methods you're going to employ to do that, what skill sets do you have, and in general, how you're going to go about it, right? So that's something very important that we're looking at client acquisition strategy, right? In terms of red flags, so if you don't have it, obviously, if you're saying that you're a great marketer, but then you have 3 followers on Twitter, it's a red flag, right? So then, if a project is just a copycat, it's also not really interesting. It's not necessarily a red flag. It's just, like we think that the project should generate or bring additional value to our ecosystem. If you just fork something and deployed it, okay, it may be, but we're also looking at how you are going to improve on what was done before. Otherwise, it's just not interesting. Um, of course, another big red flag is the project without perceived market need. What's really important is, and it ties back to my, to what I was mentioning about the client acquisition, is in order for the project to survive, it needs a lot of users. So if there is no market need for the project, or it's very niche, very small, then it potentially may not be, as good or quite, I guess it may be just not the a right project for investment at this point, right? We will need to, of course, look at other things around the projects, but that would be also something that is kind of a red flag. And another thing that comes to mind is the lack of a good thought out business model. And what I mean by that is, can the project financially sustain itself? Or, they're going to get money, and in the 3 months or in the 6 months, they run out of money, and there is nowhere to get more money. So they have to fundraise again. And then there is no plan to basically build. Sorry, I muted myself accidentally.
No
There is
worries.
no any plan to build out a strong stream of revenues that will keep project going beyond the investment, right? Because investment is only going to take you that far. You need to have a business model in place that would allow you to exist without further influxes from the investment dollars.
Of
So I think
course.
this
So
is
pretty much
like
so pretty much they have to be sustainable. They got to be able to
absolutely.
generate either fees or some type of revenue one way or another, and then kind of that that's a big part of the business of having a right business model, right?
Yeah, and it could be different. Different projects will have different types of revenue, right? It could be fees, it could be transaction fees, it could be service fees, it could be commissions on sales. You name it, right? It's really the sky is your limit. Some projects are very creative in that regard, how they build their business model. But the key is actually to have one and to think through, if I have this business model, and plan it out, kind of create financial forecast in your mind to say, if I'm going to have X clients, or if I'm going to have X volume of transactions or whatever your project is, to say what revenues how I'm going to generate, how much would it be, what are my costs, like what I'm going to have left. Because if I'm generating, $1 and my costs $100, obviously it's not going to go last long, right? It's you need to have the model where you are positive in terms of your cash flows. You're earning more than you are spending on a daily basis. And that's very important, not just in the Web3 projects. It's really important anywhere where you look at the companies. If you're not making money and if you're not sustaining yourself financially, you're not going to last. And a lot of projects don't, right? If you look at the statistics of startups, like a lot of them fail and after 1 year, and a lot of the time the reason is that they just cannot generate money to sustain themselves.
Okay, okay, awesome, awesome. Uh, Lastly, kind of I have, is there any type of deadline pretty much to apply to the Genesee DAC?
No, really, it's individual for the projects. When the project, the only thing I would say is the project needs to be ready. There is no point in applying just to be rejected. You need to feel that you have well thought out all the things that I talked about earlier during this conversation. And if you have those things and you have a kick-ass pitch deck, then maybe it's the time to apply. I mean, think about, the timing when you want to fundraise, right? Is it good to fundraise during the bear market, or would you rather wait if you have opportunity to wait and, maybe you'll get more in a bull market? Like there's a lot of considerations for the projects to when exactly to do the fundraise, but never go to ask for funds if you are not ready. So, but there is no deadline to answer your question.
Okay, awesome, awesome. I actually wanted to close out the Twitter space asking what's the best advice you would give builders, but that last advice was amazing. That pretty much answers my question, I think. So, yeah, Natalia, thanks so much for pretty much for breaking down everything about the Genesee DAC. I hope all the builders listening to these, all the teams, all the projects, took notes. The space is going to be recorded, so if we want to listen to it again and again, like here is going to be. So, thanks, Natalia. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and hope to see you on the next space.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you for having me. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. And I hope you build on Metis.
Have a great day, everyone.